Hi everyone, Giant Size here, otherwise known as Chris, and we're trying something a little different today. Now, if you follow my YouTube videos or my Twitch streams, you'll know I'm a big lover of video games. And you'll see that the majority of my content is video game playthroughs and discussions and things like that. But you may not know that another big love of mine is role-playing games, like Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, that kind of thing. And 90% of the time now, when I play those games, I'm put into the role of Dungeon Master or Game Master or whatever, where I'm responsible for creating the world, administrating the story, running the story, playing all the NPCs, right? And leading my players through the experience. So I thought it'd be really neat to give you a look at a map that I've designed and made for an upcoming campaign that I'm starting at some point. Not really sure when. So if you're a player in that campaign, obviously don't watch this. Spoilers. But if you're not, I hope it gives you a little bit of insight into how I make my new maps. Now, this is the newest style I've come up with that I really like, and I'm always advancing my styles and skills, but how I make my map, thoughts I put into it, tips and tricks, and then we'll go through and show just how easy it is, and maybe a little bit about how you can make a map as well. So let's get started. So this is the first plane. Now, this future campaign is set in a different plane than what you would think of as the normal world, right? It is a fully 100% custom campaign. That's how I prefer to do it. I don't really like drawing too much from source materials or following things exactly. I like to do it pretty much custom, and then I can draw inspiration from all over, from multiple RPG franchises as well, right? So this is a fully custom one, and it takes place on the first plane, which is, in the lore, is kind of this plane that was made by the gods as almost like a test realm to perfect things, and it's where the fairies exist now, and it's where they were first created, and this was before the plane that humans live on was kind of made afterwards. This was the test area. So this is the home to a lot of crazy creatures and beings, but primarily what you would think of as the fairies or the fae or that kind of a entity. And there's a lot of kind of wild and unstable magic and weird things that happen here. So it's a really neat area to be able to play in, and all of my NPCs or my characters and my players wanted to play as fairies. So we're gonna do this kind of fairy plane. So this is our entirety of this plane. Now, it's kind of a continent. I really, weighed on whether or not this would be, whether I could use this. Like, I could change this and immediately use this as a more normal Earth kind of, or not Earth, but like a human plane. That's why there's water, that kind of thing. So it's adaptable in case my players change their mind. But this is the continent, the island area, and what I've come up with. And you can see it started off with just kind of random shapes, right? That's how you got to build your continents, kind of filling in some areas of the map, knowing I wanted to fit into kind of a decent rectangle map situation, and then thinking about my storytelling. So when I approach a campaign, I either do it one of a couple ways. I either have a really strong idea for how the story is going to play out, and then design my map to fit that story. And this one was somewhere in between. Or I don't really have any idea how the story is going to play out, so I build the map and let it kind of create itself, and then from the map, figure out how I want the world and the story to take place. This one was a little bit in the middle. I knew a little bit about the story, the fairy plane, that kind of thing. My biggest thing, so if you look at, I'm going to zoom in a little here. Now, over in this area is the land of Aphelia, okay? And if you'll notice, the land of Ophelia has this wall that goes all the way around it. Okay, and we're going to go into more detail when we look at the actual Photoshop file for this, but just so you can see this. It has this wall that goes all the way around it, and this is kind of, in my mind, the safe land of this world, right? The land of Ophelia. And this is where my players are going to be from. They're going to be from one of these smaller cities or villages or living areas, and they're going to be traveling to Ophelia City, the big, capital. And this is where it's going to start, is this traveling to Ophelia City. And I wanted them to start in this kind of safe area, and then they're going to have reasons to have to leave and go into more risky places, right? So that's all I really knew when I started designing this map. I wanted a somewhat centralized land surrounded by other lands and areas to explore, and really to have it be a sandbox style world where my players can do whatever they want. I kind of want to build the world, put some major quest lines and some quest prompts and things in there, but they can ignore those if they want to. Now, in this one, we're gonna, with the major quest line especially, there's gonna be more of that, how would I say it? There's gonna be more of the repercussions and kind of time management, where if they're not doing things, it's going to have repercussions in the world. Or if they are doing things, it's going to have repercussions in the world, right? So there's little differences there. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But they don't have to feel like they're railroaded into decisions, which is also another reason why when I designed the land of Ophelia, I made sure we had 4 different routes out of it, like 4 main gates. We have the North Gate, the West Gate, the Southern Gate, and the East Gate. Right? So they have options. It's not like they just have one gate out. They have to kind of go that way, other than trying to make it over the wall somehow. Right? I want to leave options open. And I want to think about, as this civilization, realistically, would it have just one way in and out of this size? Probably not. So this is what I've designed. And I want to give you a little bit of a tour, and then we're going to go into Photoshop and we're going to look at it and kind of how it was made. So we'll start with a tour. So obviously we have the land of Ophelia, with Ophelia City, very big place. And I like to scatter around some small villages, little homesteads. Now, it seems if the scale with this is on, right, like, which I haven't fully decided on, it could be too sparsely populated. Maybe that's a problem. Maybe everything that's named doesn't show everything. They're going to run into smaller things that aren't named on the map, for sure. But there's some interesting things, right? So down this way, out the southern and eastern gate, they lead into the Oriat Desert. So this is a desert. It's very barren. There's not much going on with it. On the edges of the desert is where you start to find Forik Hold, which is, city. You got Drogthar, small mining city, right? The Axiet Desert is down below. Okreth Island, right? So we've got some areas for them to really see. There's like some ruins and temples and things for them to explore. And the big frozen hills, right? And the scarred mountains. So these are different mountain ranges. There's some interesting ruins they could come across. And when I play with my players, something to note is they don't get to see this whole map. They're going to see, we'll go over that in Photoshop, but there's going to be like a fog of war effect. So they can only see what they know about and then what they discover. Okay, so let's just look a little different. So I like to have different kind of, not biomes, but different styles of areas. So we have a jungle area, the Berethia jungle with some big temples, right? So we have the Bellegrad, which I'm excited about. It's kind of an enclosed, walled off military city with a lot of docks, and it's kind of like a naval thing, and it's going to be a bit mercenary-ish, right? So we have some things. We have another kind of not desert, but desolate plains, kind of a magic scarred land, and there's some interesting things out in here. Moving up, we still have more of the jungle. We have this little vale area, right? The Golden Plains, so this is a plains kind of looking area, right? Pretty normal. The Sleepy Mountain, it's a little bit of a reference to Lord of the Rings there. We've got Coldbrook Lake, so I like having big lakes, and obviously Alendra Lake is a big one. We have the Faded Plain, just some woodlands that aren't passable by roads to explore. We have Deepscape Bay, so a big bay connected to the ocean, right? So some interesting terrain features here. How, if they don't have access to boats or stuff, how are they going to get across? They could try to ford and swim in small areas. Like, just, it leaves options open to them. So the core islands has its own economy system that in my head that these smugglers ports and kind of shady people make use of. We have the Shaded Isle, so this is going to be kind of a dangerous place with this this really cool forest effect that took forever to do. The Kirith Woods, so more wooded areas, right? This is out the West Gate as we continue up. Now, over here we have this whole other island that's also walled off. This is the land of Farkuth, which is going to be in direct opposition to Ephelia. So, for everything that Ephelia is, they're not, basically. And this is another kind of big land, big province, big territory for them to explore, or possibly not if they're not able to make it into it, right? We'll see. It's going to be really interesting if they can get in here, because it's a very populated place, and to compare it to Ephelia. So we have the barren coast where there's really not much going on. We go over top. Out the North Gate here, we have Broadmouth Bay, another little island with a bunch of things going on. The Hareen Coast, right? So these are all just names I kind of just made up. The Celestial Woods with these massive trees, and this is going to be where you see some kind of more magical beings. This is definitely a magical theme over here. The Shadowlands, right? And then the Floating Hills, which is the floating lands, which I feel like it's just, you just got to have some floating lands in there. So yeah, so this is... Oh, yeah, right. And then down here in the bottom corner, we have way out in the middle, the Forgotten Temple, which is on Falesia Island, which might be a special place that they could find themselves at. So that is my continent, and I really like the look of this map. I think it turned out really good, and we're going to transition over to Photoshop now. Here we go. And we're going to talk about how it was made, and... you know, plans for it going forward and that kind of thing. So you can see I've added a hexagon kind of grid for scale. That's how I think I'm going to do it. And if we think about it, if they're in this hexagon, it takes roughly 1 day to get into another hexagon. Now, I can scale this hexagon grid to whatever I need it to. If I decide, oh, this isn't working, I think this is too big, right? Because this, 1 day might not be enough. We'll see. But so let's talk about it. So we talked about Fog of War. This is how it's going to start for my players, right? So when we zoom in here, this is all they're going to see. Now, the reason they know about all of Ephelia is because they've grown up in Ephelia, in this land. And while maybe they haven't been to the city, or they haven't seen all of it, when you grow up in a land, you understand the geography of it, you learn about it in your schooling and education, that kind of thing. You maybe see maps of it, that kind of thing. So they know enough about it that it's revealed, right? They're going to be able to see that there's 4 gates out. They're not going to know what's outside of it. I've taken, they know there's a wall. Sometimes they can see peaks of mountains over this wall, but they're not going to see everything. There's stuff hidden right in here that they don't see, right? There's stuff hidden. There's just a peek of it that a very critical player might notice. But so this is what they're going to start as. And then, obviously, once the Fog of War is lifted, I have it as a new layer so that I can just come in, right, and take my eraser and just, on the Fog of War, erase sections that they uncover. Okay, so let's talk about how this is put together. Now, the biggest thing to think about is the layers, right? Any Photoshop document, you're going to have a ton of layers, and this one has a whole bunch of them. And I've organized some of them into groups and some not. So let's talk about that. The very top of our layers is our text boxes. There is a lot of text boxes on here, one for every name, right? Whole bunch. Pretty straightforward. They were done with a slight, some of them have a slight kind of arcing to them for names of main places. The regular small names are just straight. You can see how some of the things like the Frozen Sea have names of big places. This one apparently I just missed. That happens, right? So there is some style. They all have that little bit of a beigey kind of background to them so that you can read them against the back. But having these on my separate thing, I can very easily turn them off if people need to see the map and what's underneath it, right? Because they do block some things. I tried to put them where they wouldn't block anything. All right, let's talk about the waves. So the waves, when I turn them off, you're going to see it's just along the coast. And these were done not by hand. I'm still learning to try to like make things as automatic as possible, I guess you would say, instead of having to do things by hand, which is I'm definitely not as good with. I do a lot of it by hand. But these were done automatically by just kind of a style that hugs the coast and then pushes it out a bit and draws a line, basically. And I've done lower and lower opacity and made them go less and more. Less start, a smaller gap, a little bit bigger gap. And for these, I was following a tutorial by the brush maker, which we'll talk about in a little bit when we get to building our own. I'll talk about that. And I just really like the effect. I think it turned out good. Likewise, the lines just is the border lines around it, so you could have that off if you don't like it. I like having the lines on so that it has a bit of a hard edge. And this is also for around my rivers and things like that, I believe. For a lot of my rivers, some of my rivers. Maybe not, I might have did them by hand. Alright, so I've split my layers into the building, the drawing of the map, and then the coloring. So like theoretically, I could turn all my coloring off. And then other than the few little spots that I accidentally put on the wrong layer and didn't catch it, you know, all my coloring's gone. And I can have a black and white image, right? Especially if I turn my background layer off, which is just the kind of the color scheme for the map. But I like having the coloring on. I wanted something colored, right? But I made it in the black and white and then colored it after. So how I've done that is I've split it up into different devices so that it's easy to toggle the mountains on and off and see, you know, especially if we take the coloring off, see where I was working on so that if there was a mistake, I could, you know, just fix something in the mountains, arrange the ordering, all Photoshop tricks, right? To make sure you're getting, you're not just working on one flat surface, which is going to be so hard if you're trying to layer things and move things and work with them and play with them. You're working on multiple layers to really try to do this. Now, the coloring, there's way easier ways to do this. Way easier ways. However, I was a bit paranoid about it and really wanted to do it and make sure it was done how I wanted to do it. So I actually went in by hand with the brush tool and colored this entire map by hand, which took a long time. And obviously there's easier ways to do it, to apply different textures or color layers and masks and only apply them to certain areas. But some of it is just so detailed, right, that I didn't want to do that. So like if we come in on the city, now it's gonna look blurry, and the reason why is you're only supposed to see it at up to 100% right here. This is the level you want to see it at, and it's supposed to look a little bit blurry. The tools I use to make this are designed that way to make it look a little more hand-drawn, and I'm not 100% sure whether I like that, but I think it works, and it works when you're zoomed out at the right level that you don't really even notice. But you can see, like, I went in and hand drew or hand colored each of these little roofs and the walls, and made sure it didn't go over into the grass and the trees. So when I take off my building sketch, you can see all the little paint marks I've done to make it work. Now, this is especially apparent in places like these bloody trees, which took forever. They took forever, but they looked really good, right? Because you can have just the green trees, and even in here I've done variations in color of green. I kind of stuck to certain ones, but in this, to get it to work properly and get that kind of fall look and make it stand out, right? You can see I had to go in and draw all these little blobby bits by hand, right? To make it look like this. But I think it looks really good, right? I think it looks really good, and I'm really happy about how, I'm going to turn the hexagons off so you can see, about how it's turned out. So I used my colors to set for my players the areas of the world, right? So you can see Ophelia has all of this light green grass that then fades out when they get to other areas. This place has the yellowy kind of grass. Now, there's more light green over here, but that's okay. It's separated from Ophelia. Kind of that darker green. Different tree styles. Yellowy, right? So you can see I'm using the same colors, but I'm splitting them up and trying to give a sense of biomes and different areas based on that. So the jungle, I wanted a lot of bright colored plants, right? Which was a challenge, right? You can see up in here, it's kind of got that snowy feel because it's raised up. It's got the snowier grass and lots of snow on the mountains, and all the mountains have snow to some degree on them as they go up. Right, over here we've kind of got the darker look. We've got farms, so coloring took quite a bit, but I think it was worth it, and it really allowed me to connect with each small piece of my map and make sure it looked good. I caught a lot of little mistakes as I was coloring where I had to change something, especially with kind of like the roads, which were all hand drawn to wrap in and out of, if we look, to wrap in and out of the mountains. Let's say, so like if we look here, you can see, I'll zoom in a little bit more, you can see how this road, which these towers, what I did was I placed towers, and then I connected it by hand drawing roads. So these roads kind of weave in and out the tower wall. This is not a roads per se, but the tower wall, same thing as the roads, weave in and out of these mountains. And the roads do the same thing when they pass behind a mountain, right? Through here, they pass behind a mountain, right? So all that kind of stuff. Same for rivers. So it's just a lot of details that coloring really helped me to get. All right, so let's talk about how we make this. So I'm going to go to a new project here. Now, the brushes that I'm using for this whole project are made by Joel Pigot. I paid for them. You can buy them on his website. They were about $10 to $15 for the brush pack, and they're awesome. They make this so much easier. So let's talk about them and let's look at them a little bit. So if we're on our brush tool, these are our brushes that are loaded in. So we've got some basic brushes, some shading and grass stuff, but the really neat part starts about here, and they're basically what you would think of as a stamp. So if I have, let's zoom in a little. And let's move up so that we can still see this, because, you know, credit where credit is due. So if I have my brush, and you can think of it like a stamp, right? And I look through here and I'm like, okay, so I need, there's all these different pieces, but like the really cool part is it comes with certain things. So, okay, I need some steep hills. You just click and it's in there. And then I can be like, okay, like that's pretty cool. I'm just gonna add some more hills in, right? Like, look how easy this is. Just to combine and get some hills. Now, obviously you could tidy this up, but most of it's done for you. Okay, so here's a hill range. Boom, boom, boom. Like, so quick just to make some hills, right? So if we take these out, we can look at some other brushes. Alright, what do we got going on here? There we go. Right? So it comes with large sections that are just easily combined together by kind of putting it right near the border. Right? And they just combine so easily. So easily. And this is what I used to really make my mountains and things. It made the mountains so much easier by being able to go through and say, alright, I want that. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of this in. Make some cliffs. Okay, let's get another mountain range. Oh, it turns out this way. Okay, let's do that. Right? Like, it's just so much easier. And so that's what I used for my map. And obviously I did a lot of work where I would put things in front of each other and then erase the bits behind to get what effect I really wanted. But you can create these really interesting styles and patterns, and so the mountains are the highlight for me in this pack. There's a lot of good things in here, but the mountains are just gorgeous, right? So let's talk about, and he's got all these little pieces to make your own mountains. So for those areas where you want to expand on them, you can do that. Now, some other interesting things in this brush pack. It's quite a large brush pack. You can get things like fissures, right? Some different fissures. You got the floating islands, different types of floating islands. Makes it easy. A crystal mountain kind of thing. So there's all sorts of interesting options in here. Now, there's a couple different styles in here as well. So there's symbols, what I think of as a symbol, like a symbol for a small house. So if you want a 2D flat on thing with symbols for places, right? You can do that. Or you can do the more 3D kind of looking ones, which is what I chose to use, like a small, oops, wrong one. A small house, right? Or a barn, or a dock, or some more docks, right? And they just, here's the watchtowers I used, trading posts. So you can, there's all these things, and you can combine them to kind of do some interesting little effects, right? Just on the fly. This one I could put behind to come up with some stuff, and as you edit it and you get more comfortable with what you want to do and which parts you want to use, they just go together so well. You can see there's big walled cities, which obviously I used part of this for Ophelia City, and then, you know, I would not double it up like that, but really interesting stuff. So I highly recommend this brush set, because it just works so well, and it just takes a lot of the pain out of building these worlds. I've been really happy with them. The trees are just beautiful. You can see some different trees, especially the big forest mixed trees sections. You get some very dense, like, pine forests that you can combine. Right? Or these really large, if we back up. Now, I'm not sponsored in any way by this brush maker, but I was really happy with it, and I thought it would be unfair to show how this map and what I did with it without telling you what I used to make it, right? Awesome. So many cool things. I loved making this. Like, you just get these really interesting things. So what else? There's all sorts of thorns, dead bushes, cactuses, jungle plants, desert plants. Like, it just goes on and on. And then you get more icons down at the bottom, some special little brushes, and at the top there's some neat things like, oh, a main path. Okay, there you go. If that's what you want your path to look like, it's just that easy. Or the dot dash path, right, for like a trail. Boom, easy. I like the shading thing that he has where, oh, that didn't really work, did it? This one? Yeah, you can just use this to put the grass in, right? Or put this one as smaller grass and it just fills it in. Easy, right? It just makes it easy, which is so nice. So nice. So I highly recommend that, and hopefully you enjoyed seeing what you can do with that style of brush and some creativity and coming up with some different things. And hopefully you like the map and like this kind of content, because I just wanted to share it with you. And I'm working on another project. I'll give you a sneak peek of it. It's not done by any stretch of the imagination. It has quite a bit to go. Quite a bit to go. Is it this one? But this is one I plan to work on stream at some point and do like a just chatting and chill kind of thing. So this is a Ephelia City, but a detail map of Ephelia City, and this is huge. Like it's I probably made it way too big, because when we zoom in down here on the part I've been working on, you can see how this is all put together. And the little world that I'm making, I've been working in the market. So the market, when you zoom in even more, that's about one too many zooms. It gets a little blurry at that point. That's about the place you want to be. All these different market stalls, and I can talk to you about how I made this. So if you want to see that, leave a comment below, or you can join me on a Twitch stream, and maybe in a future video I can talk about how I make my town maps, and this very detailed and time-consuming way of doing it, but it just makes for such compelling maps and content that it's hard to not like what you're looking at, and hard to not want to do this detail for all your maps, because your players are gonna love it. Now, I have a long way to go on this city. I could spend 100 hours working on this probably, and I might do that. I enjoy it. When I just need something to chill, this is great. So we'll see. It's a passion project and a labor of love, but it's a work in progress. So if you ever want to check that out and see a stream where we're just working on this and hanging out, or any video games, because we play a lot of video games, come over to Giant Size Gaming on Twitch. Check me out. Subscribe below to keep an eye out for these D&D videos, because I would like to do them more. And let me know what you want to see on this channel, because if you're a big fan of Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder or map making or creativity or world building, that kind of thing, we can talk about that. We can go through my files of my campaign, my Pathfinder campaign that I ran, where I have all of these cities. Talks about each building, talks about all these different things in them, and then massive Word documents. I'll pull a Word document up that allows you to see. This one's just a small one, but gives details on each of these buildings, their inhabitants, everything, right? Like, it's just, we have this. This was my map from back then when I was doing it, which is obviously way too simple for what I want to do now, but it worked, and it was really good for what it did. I made this in MS Paint. Right? So even if you just have paint, you can make a map that works. Right? And there's just so much here. Right? So this is how I kind of went through and built my world. And how did I mostly did it through buildings. Right? And there's just so many things for people to look at and kind of talk about, and we can plan and have those conversations. So I hope you enjoyed. I think I'm starting to ramble on a little bit for a YouTube video, but join me in a Twitch stream and we'll chat. You can ask all the questions you want. Leave a comment below. Ask some questions. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you really enjoyed what we're doing here and you want to see more. And thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you stuck around till the end. See you in the next video.